Before we get into the history, let me tell you a story. Imagine you're a kid, and every single day on the way home from school, the same group of kids is waiting for you, taking your leftover lunch money, pushing you, jumping you, and every single time you throw a punch back, you're the one the teachers call a troublemaker. Now imagine that kid starts walking home with other kids from the neighborhood who've been getting jumped by the same group. You're not a gang. You're not looking for trouble. You're just trying to get home in one piece. That's Iran. The neighborhood is the Middle East. The one way home is sovereignty. Control of your own land, your own oil, your own future. And the group doing the jumping has the most powerful military apparatus on the planet behind them. Every time Iran throws a punch back, CNN puts a camera in their face and asks why this kid is so violent. Nobody shows you what happened on the way home. Iran didn't start the fight. They just refused to keep taking the beating. And that's what the day is about. Today I'm talking about instruments. Specifically, the instruments that the United States and Israel use to manufacture enemies, point at the results, and somehow never get asked about the three fingers pointing back at themselves. This is not about defending an organization. This is about following the documented record. Declassified documents, admitted operations, words from Israeli officials' own mouths. Because when you control the narrative, you can point the finger all day, and nobody asks who's holding it. Watch the pattern. Let's take a walk. To understand everything happening right now, you have to start here, because the story of the U.S.-Iran hostility does not begin with the Ayatollah. It does not begin with hostage crises or nuclear programs. It begins in 1953, when Iran had a democracy and the United States decided to destroy it. In August 1953, the CIA orchestrated the overthrow of Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. The coup strengthened the Shah's authority, and he continued to rule Iran for 26 years as a pro-Western monarch until he was overthrown in the Iranian Revolution in 1979. So why did the U.S. overthrow a democracy? Oil. The Shah quickly returned to take power and, as thanks for the American help, signed over 40% of Iran's oil fields to U.S. companies. They took the oil, installed a dictator, trained his secret police in torture and surveillance, kept him in power for 26 years, and then were shocked when the Iranian people revolted in 1979 and have never trusted the United States since. It is generally agreed today that the 1953 coup sowed the seeds for the Islamic Revolution of 1979. You planted the seed in 1953. You watered it with brutal dictatorship for 26 years. And then you act confused about what grew. That is instrument number one, regime change. And it is the root of everything that follows. Fast forward to 1980. Iraq invades Iran. 8 years of war, over 1 million people dead. Now, who did the United States back? Iraq. Saddam Hussein, the man they would later invade twice and tell you was the world's greatest monster. But in the 1980s, he was their guy. In 1988, during the waning days of Iraq's war with Iran, the United States learned through satellite imagery that Iran was about to gain a major strategic advantage. U.S. intelligence officials had conveyed the location of the Iranian troops to Iraq, fully aware that Hussein's military would attack with chemical weapons, including sarin, a lethal nerve agent. Let's say that one more time. The United States gave Saddam Hussein the coordinates, knowing he would use nerve gas. The Iraqis used mustard gas and sarin prior to four major offensives in 1988 that relied on U.S. satellite imagery, maps, and other intelligence. These attacks helped to tilt the war in Iraq's favor and bring Iran to the negotiating table. The United States directed chemical weapons attacks against Iran. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is a declassified CIA document published by Foreign Policy magazine. And then 15 years later, the United States invaded Iraq, using chemical weapons as the justification. The same chemical weapons program they helped build. The same Saddam Hussein they armed and guided. When he stopped being useful, they flipped the script, pointed the finger, and told you he was the problem. Three fingers pointing back were never mentioned. Now let's talk about the most brazen instrument of all, manufacturing the very organizations you claim to be fighting. We've covered this in detail before, but the overview is essential. Israel did not want a unified Palestinian political movement. So starting in the late 1970s, they funded and enabled the religious Islamic movement that would become Hamas, specifically to undermine the secular PLO. Israeli Brigadier General Yitzhak Segev admitted to the New York Times that he helped finance the Palestinian and Islamist movement as a counterweight to the PLO. His words, "The Israeli government gave me a budget, and the military government gives to the mosques." That movement became Hamas, and then Netanyahu kept it alive on purpose, for decades, as a political tool. At a Likud party meeting in 2019, Netanyahu said openly, anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas. This is part of our strategy. Then there's Hezbollah. Israel invaded Lebanon in 1982, stayed in occupation for 18 years, and in coordination with right-wing militia, participating in the killing of between 2,000 and 3,500 Palestinian refugees and Lebanese civilians at Sabra and Shatila. Several Lebanese groups formed to repel the invasion, run from the Shia Muslim community, traditionally a quiet demographic. Hezbollah was born from that resistance. Before 1982, Hezbollah did not exist. After Israel's invasion and 18-year occupation, it became the most sophisticated non-state military force on the planet. You built it, you funded one, you invaded and created the other. And then you stand in front of cameras and call them existential threats. That is instrument 3. Create, fund, and point. Now, how do you get a population to support a war they wouldn't otherwise support? You give them an incident. You give them a villain. You give them a moment of shock and outrage, and you make sure nobody asks who staged it. Israel has a documented, admitted history of this. 1954, the Lavon Affair. Israeli military intelligence recruited Egyptian Jews to plant bombs inside Egyptian, American, and British-owned civilian targets, cinemas, libraries, and American educational centers. Their attacks were to be blamed on the Muslim Brotherhood or Egyptian communists, with the goal of creating enough instability to keep British troops in the Suez Canal zone. Israel was going to bomb American buildings, blame Arab extremists, manipulate Western foreign policy. The operation was exposed. Israel publicly denied any involvement until 2005, when the surviving agents were awarded certificates of appreciation by the Israeli president. They denied it for 51 years. Then they gave the operatives medals. 1967, the USS Liberty. The documentary evidence and testimony indicated that Israel's attack on the USS Liberty was planned and deliberate, and cannot possibly have been an accident. The Israeli pilots and their superiors who ordered the attack were well aware that the ship was American. President Lyndon Johnson and Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara ordered the inquiry to conclude it was mistaken identity, despite overwhelming evidence of the contrary. The Court of Inquiry transcript released to the public was not the original. 34 American soldiers killed, 171 wounded, covered up by the President of the United States. The theory, supported by multiple analysts, is that Israel wanted the ship sunk to be blamed on Egypt, drawing America into the 1967 war on Israel's side. The U.S. government helped bury evidence of an attack on its own military for an ally. Instrument 4. Manufacture the moment, control the response. So let's name the instruments clearly, because this is what gets left off every cable news panel. Instrument 1, regime change. Overthrow democracies that control resources. Install compliant dictators. Blame the blowback on religious extremism. Instrument 2, proxy war. Arm whoever will fight your designated enemy. Direct chemical weapons attacks. Then invade that same proxy when they stop being useful. Instrument 3, create and fund the enemy. Build up the opposition you need to justify permanent conflict. Keep them alive when they're useful. Bomb them when the cameras are on. Instrument 4, false flags. Stage incidents, control the narrative, cover up what gets exposed, give medals to the operatives 50 years later. And through all of it, point at Iran, point at Hamas, point at Hezbollah, point at the Houthis, point at anyone still standing after everything they've done in the region, while three fingers point back at who overthrew Iran's democracy in 1953. Three fingers point back at who guided nerve gas attacks on Iranian soldiers in 1988. Three fingers point back to who built Hamas in the 1970s and kept them funded through Qatar. Three fingers point back at who invaded Lebanon and created Hezbollah out of a people who just wanted to get home. I'll say it one more time, because this is the part they don't want in your head. Iran has not initiated a war against any country in over 200 years. Not one in 200 years. Every military action Iran has taken in this era has been a response to a coup, to a proxy war, to assassinations of their scientists, to the bombing of their embassy, to an unprovoked surprise on the attack on their soil. That is not a defense of Iran's government. That is a factual timeline. The kid on the way home from school didn't throw the first punch. He just finally stopped walking home alone. And the group that's been jumping him every day for 70 years wants you focused on the punch, not the pattern. I'm Keith. Watch the pattern. Follow the money. Connect the dots. And ask yourself, who benefits from the story you're being told? This is Keith Speaks. I'll see you next time.